Tonight, new details emerge in the Prince Albert homicide of 13-month-old Tanner Brass. Also, a closer look at the data reveals Saskatchewan has had more COVID-19 deaths the first 5 months of this year than it did the same time last year. Plus, could Saskatchewan be home to the world's cleanest potash mine? Ottawa plans to spend millions to reach that goal.
This is CBC Saskatchewan News.
It is Monday, June 13th, and the CBC Saskatchewan News starts right now. Good evening, and thank you for joining us. New details are emerging in a Saskatchewan infant homicide case. 13-month-old Tanner Brass was found dead in February in Prince Albert. His father is charged with second-degree murder. Tanner's mother says she repeatedly pleaded with police officers to protect her baby, who was left with his dad when she was arrested. Now, there's a witness corroborating that. Yasmin Granea reports.
Here at the cells of the Prince Albert police station, Kyla Frenchman says she begged officers to help keep her 13-month-old son, Tanner, safe. Chris Bird was at the cells at the same time and heard her piercing screams.
That early morning I heard a lady yelling, "My baby, my baby."
Frenchman, a member of Thunderchild First Nation, previously told CBC News that while she was in the cells, she pleaded with officers to go help Tanner. But Bird is the first person to state publicly that he heard those cries for help.
So it's good that there is a witness that can validate what she said.
Frenchman called police to her basement suite after her partner, Cage Brass, threw her out, with the baby still inside. When officers arrived at the home, Frenchman asked them to get her son, Tanner. But instead, Frenchman says officers accused her of being drunk, which she denies, handcuffed her, and took her to police holding cells. After being arrested, Frenchman says she kept begging officers to help her baby.
I told them that I was worried for my baby, and they wouldn't listen.
Police did not go back to the house until hours later and found Tanner dead. Brass is charged with second-degree murder. CBC News has learned that it wasn't Frenchman's repeated pleas that brought police back that day. It was Brass himself who called them. The Saskatchewan Public Complaints Commission is investigating the police response. The case has outraged First Nations leaders and others who are calling for the immediate firing of Police Chief Jonathan Bergen. Bergen declined an interview request. His deputy wouldn't comment on any elements of the case, citing the ongoing investigation.
I have not witnessed, experienced, or received any concerns that would negatively impact my confidence in Police Chief Jonathan Bergen to lead our organization.
It's unclear when or if the results of the PCC investigation will be released publicly, but some say major changes are needed regardless. Yasmin Granea, CBC News, Prince Albert, Saskatchewan.
A 21-year-old man is charged with mischief after a woman's truck was shot with a crossbow in Saskatoon last week.
Can you cut it by any chance on the other side? It should be just a fiberglass shot.
Probably just snap right off.
Oh yeah, I will. Whitney Gao captured that video in the parking lot of Cabela's on Preston Avenue last Wednesday night. She says she had just gotten into her truck when she suddenly heard a pop. Gao discovered an arrow stuck in the rear driver's side of her truck. Saskatoon police seized a crossbow and arrows and arrested a man. He's been released, but he's due back in court on that mischief charge on July 19th. More than 2 years in, COVID-19 doesn't dominate every conversation anymore, but people are still dying COVID-related deaths, and it might be more than you think. Alexander Kwan brings us that story.
Many Saskatchewan residents may feel like they're done with COVID-19, but that doesn't mean it's done with us. COVID-19 has quietly killed more people in Saskatchewan in the first 5 months of this year than in the same period last year. In total, 434 people died from COVID between January and the end of May. In 2021, 391 people died from COVID in the same time span. Senior Medical Health Officer Corey Neudorf says the Omicron variant may have had less severe symptoms than the variants that came before it, but it also spread faster and infected more people.
You can take the little bit lower proportion of people needing hospitalization or death but multiply it by the vastly larger number of people actually getting sick. And what it equals is more deaths in this period than in previous waves.
There are no longer any public health measures to control this spread. Saskatchewan was among the first provinces to drop proof of vaccination, and there is no requirement to mask indoors or isolate if you have COVID. But people are still dying from the virus, most of them seniors with underlying conditions.
So you do the math on this and you say, just from a perspective of wanting to avoid unnecessary death in all kinds of people, yes, as a society, we should have done more.
The Ministry of Health did not respond when asked whether its decisions resulted in COVID-19 deaths. Instead, it said that all provinces have seen a higher number of deaths with Omicron due to the high number of people impacted. As Saskatchewan looks to the future, Neudorf says COVID-19 will likely become a seasonal virus, like influenza, which peaks in winter and early spring, and may require booster shots to deal with the new strains of COVID-19. But booster doses have stalled in Saskatchewan. Only 50% of the eligible population had one in February, and an uptake still hasn't hit 53%. That's something that Neudorf says will need to be dealt with by the provincial government before the next wave arrives. Alexander Kwan, CBC News, Regina.
The Saskatchewan School Boards Association is reacting to comments Premier Scott Moe made on Friday. Moe was criticizing a move by some school divisions, including Saskatoon Public Schools, to charge parents for lunch supervision.
I find that very perplexing because the funding is up across the education sector. In fact, and I think the education minister has mentioned that there are ample reserves in many, if not all, of the school divisions across the province. Those reserves have actually increased over the course of the last number of years, and before a school division is going to charge parents additional dollars for noon hour recess, is what I understand here, they most certainly should be looking at using some of the reserves that have been growing in the last few years as opposed to sending out invoices to parents.
The Catholic School Board in Saskatoon announced its budget today. It will also charge parents for lunch supervision of elementary students, and it's cutting 19 full-time teacher positions. The School Boards Association says not all boards can tap into reserves.
The challenge is that the reserves are distributed differently around the province. So some of the boards that have had to make some of those more difficult decisions have already drawn down their reserves over the course of the last 5 years of chronic underfunding of education. That's not the case of all divisions. Some of them did have, some larger savings that they are able to draw on, and those divisions that do have those reserves are largely doing that.
School divisions have until June 30th to submit their budgets. Already, 4 divisions have revealed that together they will cut more than 80 jobs. Ottawa has announced it's partnering with Australian mining giant BHP to make its mining project here cleaner and greener. The company is planning a $7.5 billion potash mine near the village of Jansen. Today, the federal government promised to invest millions of dollars to make the mine more environmentally friendly. Kendall Latimer has more.
The BHP potash mine in Saskatchewan is set to be one of the biggest in the world. And although it's not up and running yet, the company is already setting big targets. And the Canadian government wants to make sure that the company meets those targets with a more sustainable approach.
Not only is it going to be the largest potash mine, but it's going to be the greenest potash mine in the world.
The Canadian government is offering up to $100 million to BHP to help it reduce carbon emissions. The company believes it can minimize its carbon footprint in a major way.
You will see 50% less carbon dioxide coming out of this mine than a traditional potash mine. We're committed to the responsible use of water. We will use 60% less water than your average mine in terms of production of potash on a ton per ton basis.
The company also plans to use electric vehicles and equipment underground, as well as what it calls state-of-the-art technology.
It will use 60% less equipment underground than traditional potash mines, and it will be 2.5 times more productive than what we've done in the past.
The federal government and BHP believe this potash mine will be critical, not just for Canada, but for the world for decades to come. Potash is used for fertilizer by farmers. It plays a key role in mass food production and global food security.
We think the need for potash is going to be driven by global population growth, the move to improve diets, and the need for more sustainable agriculture.
BHP says the mine's initial production capacity will actually increase Canada's overall production capacity by about 22%. The mine is expected to be up and running in about 5 years' time. Kendall Latimer, CBC News, Saskatoon.
Canada Post is releasing 3 new stamps on Indigenous Peoples Day that feature Indigenous leaders. The first was unveiled in Regina today. Harry Daniels was an advocate for Métis and non-status First Nations from Saskatchewan. He was instrumental in pushing for the constitutional recognition of Métis people as one of the Aboriginal peoples of Canada. Daniels died in 2004.
He had so many different honors and things, but of course, this is the biggest. This is the proudest, I'm sure, any of us, myself, his family, his siblings, everybody. There couldn't be a bigger honor. This is wonderful.
Canada Post will unveil 2 more Indigenous leaders to be featured on stamps in the coming days. The stamps go on sale June 21st.
When I was asked to put together a letter that would go in a time capsule, it was a bit of a head scratcher for me, thinking, what do you want to say to a community 100 years from now?
Marking the occasion for future generations, today Mayor Sandra Masters joined the Regina Police Service to place a time capsule in the walls of the newly constructed link between RPS headquarters and the building now known as RPS HQ West. HQ West used to be the home of the Saskatchewan Transportation Company. The goal of the capsule is to reflect policing in the year 2022, and inside went that letter, along with a police uniform and some COVID tests. As for the rest of it, I guess we'll have to wait the 100 years. You won't have to wait that long for the forecast, though. Ethan will have that for you after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Evacuated residents from Stanley Mission are heading home today. Last week, about 1,100 people, about half the community, were forced to leave due to a raging wildfire. The evacuees found refuge in neighboring communities as well as Saskatoon, Prince Albert and La Ronge. However, as of last night, the fire was 80% contained, and that meant the general evacuation order could be lifted. The firefighting efforts continue, though.
Fire is about just over 11,000 hectares. And then they scan the fire to see if there's any hot spots, and then they put crews in there to go in there and work that area, so that way the fire doesn't take off again, because the fire, once it gets going, it can jump a long ways.
Chief Tammy Cook-Searson says they lost as many as 5 cabins in the first days of the fire, but they were able to save 2 cultural camps. Parts of southern Alberta are bracing for heavy rainfall over the next few days. Just in the last few minutes, the city of Calgary has declared a local state of emergency in response to heavy rainfall. Environment Canada is forecasting torrential downpour on the eastern slopes of the Rockies. And Calgary was already preparing earlier today by reducing the water in one of its main reservoirs. And in BC, parts of the interior and the province's north remain at risk of flooding. Snowmelts and heavy rain are causing waterways to swell. The risk of flooding is expected to elevate further today and tomorrow in the Kootenay region. Forecasters predict between 50 to 80 millimeters of rain could fall near Fernie by tomorrow in East Kootenay, and residents in the community of 6 Mile have been told to evacuate.
This weather update is brought to you by Capital Ford Lincoln. The exclusive export event is back.
And Ethan Williams joins me now with a look at your forecast, and all that rain to the west makes me wonder what's coming here.
Yeah, it looks like it is going to be heading our way, Sam. That same system is going to be impacting us, albeit maybe not quite as much as they're seeing in southern Alberta and southeastern BC. But we had some rain this weekend, and of course, what comes after the rain is always a lovely rainbow. This was on Saturday in Regina. Brian capturing this spectacular shot. Bit of a double rainbow there as well. And Dolores headed northwest to town, and she caught this one. Almost looks like it's out of a storybook. You can almost see the pot of gold at the end of the road there. But our forecast, not all sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. We are looking at a severe thunderstorm watch in effect for Regina, Moose Jaw, Assiniboia, Gravelbourg, and the Weyburn-Estevan area. And now rainfall warnings in in effect now for a good portion of the central part of the province and the Churchill region, all because of that system which is impacting southern Alberta and BC. You can see it here on radar. The system is beginning to swirl around. We're seeing some thunderstorm cells pop up in the south of the province. Heavy rain, though, to the north. And here is how we think this system is going to play out. So widespread showers and thunderstorms tonight in south and central. We get to the overnight hours tonight, and you can see how this system really starts to swirl around. The center of it, just in the southern part of Alberta. And you'll notice that that rain starts to really consolidate and along an area between Prince Albert and La Ronge is where it'll be heaviest overnight tonight. We get to tomorrow morning and you'll notice that a good portion of southern Saskatchewan, except for the Parkland region, but a good portion of west central and southern Saskatchewan will actually see some sunshine tomorrow as this system is largely wrapping around to the north. And then as we get into tomorrow night, we're watching a second low pressure system, this one developing on the backside of the first system. And this one is going to bring rain widespread through much of the province, some significant rain on Wednesday. So no matter where you are, you're likely going to get some. And then as the system quickly moves out on Thursday, we'll see clearing conditions as we start to head toward the weekend. Now, rainfall amounts with that rainfall warning, generally between 50 and 70 millimeters, not being ruled out at this point. These amounts between 50 and 60 for the most part in the region that's most affected, La Ronge, Meadow Lake, Buffalo Narrows. The south part of the province, you'll notice in Regina, Moose Jaw, even toward the southwest part of the province, not expecting quite as much rain, but you get to Saskatoon, Melfort, Hudson Bay, and these amounts really start to rack up 40 to 60 millimeters in some parts. Now, if there's any good news in this, it really drops our fire risk. This is the outlook for tomorrow, and a good swath of the province now under that low risk, the lowest it can go, and a moderate risk as well. So fires, especially that one near Stanley Mission that we mentioned earlier, likely going to be taken care of by the time this system is out of here. Regina's next 7 days, not a bad day tomorrow. Probably some sun peeking out. We're going to see a high of 20. The rain moves in Wednesday, 5 to 10 millimeters. Look at Saturday, big warm up. That humidex is going to make it feel close to 40. The overnight low only getting down to around 20 degrees. Saskatoon, a little cooler as that low pressure system moves in. Expect that says 5 millimeters on Wednesday, but it is likely going to be locally higher. And you know, Sam, it's been a long time since I've had rain boots. Might need to go out and purchase some for the next couple of days.
I'm just curious how many ducks will find them where their places to, parking lots and be confused about where they belong after
Yeah, I think Mother Nature will be all over the place the next few days.
Thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
Ukrainian dance raised spirits and money over the weekend. Dancers and volunteers from Regina's Ukrainian, Hungarian, and Polish communities united for the Stand with Ukraine Benefit Day. It was like a mini mosaic at the Regina Performing Arts Center with Ukrainian food and wares for sale. And of course, donations were collected. All the proceeds will support displaced Ukrainians arriving in Saskatchewan. And the day was a success. They raised $22,717. Well done. Stay with us. We will have the latest from Ukraine after the break. Russia has bombarding Ukrainian defenses as the battle for the Donbass intensifies. Ukraine says it's losing between 100 and 200 soldiers a day. Its leader pleading with the West for better weapons to arm his outgunned army. Meanwhile, a new report is putting a grim spotlight on Kharkiv. Salima Shivji has more details.
The bombs fell on Kharkiv for weeks on end. A relentless onslaught from the start of the invasion, says Amnesty International, that led to hundreds of civilian deaths. The destruction complete in some of Kharkiv's suburbs, where Amnesty claims Russian troops used banned munitions like cluster bombs. They scatter over wide areas indiscriminately.
It was horrible. When the Russians were firing, you would get thrown into the air from your chair. It's hard to describe.
Amnesty's report comes complete with this video, evidence the rights group says of cluster bombs targeting people waiting for aid. The fragments picked up by Kharkiv's residents, part of mounting evidence, Amnesty argues, of an utter disregard for civilian lives that the group says amounts to Russian war crimes. The battle is now south of Kharkiv in Severodonetsk in the Donbas region, and the situation is getting more and more desperate. Ukraine's control of the last city it holds in Luhansk province is weakening day by day. Its troops pushed into an industrial zone where some 500 civilians are also holed up. Ukrainian troops are fighting for literally every meter of ground, President Volodymyr Zelensky says. But the country needs more weapons from the West, lots of them and fast. It's a big ask, but the full list is detailed in this tweet from one of Zelensky's advisors, a direct plea to defense ministers meeting in Brussels at NATO later this week. Ukraine's argument that the fate of the Donbas and the war hangs in the balance. Salima Shivji, CBC News, London.
The committee investigating the January 6th attack on Capitol Hill held its second day of public hearings today in Washington. Today, the panel dug deeper into what it calls the big lie, that U.S. President Donald Trump was informed that claims of fraud in the 2020 presidential election were false, but continued to push them.
You will also hear testimony that President Trump rejected the advice of his campaign experts on election night and instead followed the course recommended by an apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani to just claim he won and insist that the vote counting stop, to falsely claim everything was fraudulent. He falsely told the American people that the election was not legitimate. In his words, quote, a major fraud. Millions of Americans believed him.
Trump's former campaign manager testified that he advised Trump not to declare victory as ballots were still being counted. He said Trump refused to listen. The president's attorney general at the time testified that Trump became, quote, detached from reality in his pursuit to fight the election results. And Ethan is back with one last look at tonight's weather.
And we'll see cloudy conditions in Regina tonight, Sam, or mostly cloudy. We'll be at 16 degrees at midnight. Those winds out of the southeast, about 20 kilometers an hour. We'll be fully overcast by the time we get to tomorrow morning. We drop a degree to around 14. Winds changing to the west at 20 kilometers an hour. Then we get to the noon hour, and we do get some clearing. Sun and cloud, 18 degrees. The good thing with this system that's moving through is that winds won't be too bad for the next couple of days as the rain moves in. Saskatoon, we are looking at some light rain showers tonight, winds south around 30 kilometers an hour. We will see some clearing conditions as we get to 8 a.m., 12 degrees, some winds gusting around 30 or so, and then we get to the noon hour, cloud cover builds back in, winds are dropping down, we'll be at 16 degrees, Sam.
All right, thanks, Ethan.
You're welcome.
And before we leave you tonight, on Saturday, Queen City Pride hosted Regina's annual Pride Parade. Here are some of the sights and sounds of the colorful event.
The pandemic definitely had an impact on everybody, and especially on the 2S LGBT community. There's a disproportionate impact in all sorts of ways, and one of the ways was definitely our ability to gather as community. It's still very important to be celebrating Pride. It's still very much a struggle for our community to live their lives, in equity and freedom. And so the Pride Parade, it's just, one of those symbolic moments that happens every year. And it's always important to celebrate Pride.
Well, if you missed it, you've got another chance. Saskatoon is hosting its Pride Parade on this coming Saturday at 1 o'clock. That is it for us tonight. For news anytime, you can head to cbc.ca/sask or subscribe to the CBC Saskatchewan YouTube channel. Glenn Reed will be back with more local news at 11. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great night.